Hi everybody, welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Oana.
So today we are going to talk about an article that just came out that sort of hinted that some of these iBuyer companies and corporations that are buying real estate could somehow be manipulating the real estate market. Okay, so here's the scenario. An article came out here in Las Vegas. I'm going to put the link below the video. And what it said was that there was this TikTok made by an agent in Henderson that had like 3 million views. And what he was alleging was that corporations could come in and buy 29 houses in a zip code for one price. But then the last one they buy, they could buy for a higher price. And then they could say, well, because this whole house sold for this, all these other houses are now worth that. And it's kind of fake inflating their portfolio, right? Okay, so what we're going to talk about is, first of all, we don't know that that's happening. Okay, because this was theorized, but we're going to talk about a scenario that likely happens, that potentially can be misleading because the people use the data when a home sells to decide what a home's value is, right? Okay, so here's the scenario. When a person sees a home sale and the price is published, the sale price, usually all you see in the tax record is the price, right?
Right.
So whatever it sold for. If it sold for $300,000, it's a $300,000 house, right?
Right.
Okay, so here's an example. I'm going to put the screen up on the for you guys to see. Okay, so want to take a look at this. You have a $300,000 sale price, but it was an iBuyer that bought the house, and they charged the buyer $27,000, and they also charged for repairs because they said, hey, we need to fix the house up if we're going to sell it or whatever. So they charged $4,500 for repairs. And then they said, we're going to charge you for all the closing costs. So there's $6,000. So the seller actually only nets $262,500 in this example. In your years of experience, what price is going to show up in the tax record?
The sale price.
The $300,000.
Right.
Okay, so Oana, what are some of the problems with all of these costs that effectively lower the fair market value of the home? So the seller nets market value, but then a different price shows up in tax records. How's that a problem?
So look, the issue is that it's not transparent. Most transactions are transparent, right? You see that in the tax record that it sold for $300,000, it sold for $300,000. Particularly if it went through the MLS, if you look in the MLS and there were any closing costs, you can even see those. So now you've got a really good idea of what the value of that house is. With an iBuyer, there are all kinds of other numbers involved that we just don't get to see. Those are not public numbers, so you're never going to get to see those. So you don't actually know the true value of the property, because remember, the value of property is what a buyer is willing to pay and a seller is willing to accept. But with iBuyers, a lot of times that is not a transparent number.
Okay, here's why this is important. Everything she said is exactly right. Because what you don't realize is that $27,000, the $4,500, and the $6,000, they could have just dispensed with all that and said, like an investor knocks on your door and says, hey, I'll just give you $26,500 cash, right? And they give you $26,250, excuse me, cash, and then you have that money and you walk away and they put in the tax record that's what they paid for the house. Here's the problem with that. The investor honestly doesn't want to do that, and this is why. Let's say he buys your house for $26,250, and then he puts $30,000 into it and fixes it up. Now it doesn't matter if it's his money or your money, and then he sells it for $300,000. That appreciation is going to be scrutinized by FHA and people like that. So if someone else wants to buy your house, there may be some anti-flipping rule that comes into place, right?
Right.
What's going to happen, Oana, to the anti-flipping rule when the FHA sees this house was purchased for $300,000 and then they flip it right to another person for $300,000? Is it even going to be on their radar?
Well, no. It's not going to be on their radar because it's not transparent. And you're right. There are rules. There are anti-flipping rules, particularly if the end buyer is using FHA financing. So there are rules regarding that sort of thing. But they can't see it. And this is a kind of a problem. We don't see a lot of it, and let's face it, the iBuyers are a pretty small portion of the market.
6%, I think,
right.
In Vegas. They're 6%.
Right. So it's a pretty small portion of the market, so it's not like they're overly influential in the market, but they do influence the market. I mean, they are a force. They're just not that big of a force. It's like with everything else, because it's interesting, it's sexy, then everybody wants to talk about it, and all of a sudden it kind of gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah, the problem and the problem is that yes, they're a small portion of the market right now, but remember 15 years ago Zillow was just a company that only thing they had on their site was a made up number that was your estimated home value. That was just really a guess. They just took your price per square foot and your zip code kind of a thing and threw out a number. So, oh, we think it's worth this, right? And it didn't make any sense.
Well, it's still kind of that way, but okay.
It's still kind of that way. But, you know, and it's funny because all three of the four big companies that do this now, they're all different. And sometimes they're not even close, right? They're $100,000 apart. And you're like, well, Redfin and Zillow or you know, whoever, they all say the homes are worth this.
Right.
But this is not transparent when a person can come in and buy your house, charge you, you know, the contract price, they take all the costs onto your side, and then they make you pay them. You effectively walk away with a price. The MLS actually has fields that you put these things into. If you got a credit for repairs, it shows up in the MLS. If you got a closing costs, when we do BPOs for a BPO, and if we see a house sold for $300,000, if we see a $9,000 credit to the buyer's closing costs, we mark that in there as a deduction from the actual value. So we don't BPO it at 300 because it wasn't a 300 transaction. It was 300, but they just gave away $9,000. So we would say that's 291. That would be like the BPO value. And all of that's hidden with iBuyers because they don't do it. They don't buy your house through the MLS. When they sell it, they put it into the MLS. But when they buy it, they don't. All you see is they just report the sale price through the tax records.
Right. And you know, it's like with everything else. Until the problem becomes big enough and severe enough, nothing will come of it. And then at some point, the government will get involved, like they like to do, and that they'll regulate this more. The same thing happened way back when, about 15 plus years ago. There were all kinds of things that are not dissimilar to this, where there were kickbacks, there was all kinds of money going back, and it was an inflated value and that sort of thing. And people were getting loans on the inflated value and then walking away from them. This is a little bit different, but it's also a bit similar because the values are not really what they are reported to be. And that is a concern as the iBuyers grow in the market and as this trend continues. That is a concern.
Yeah, it is a problem when a couple corporations control the data that everybody's seeing, because then they have the ability to manipulate the data to suit them, especially if they're big owners in the market.
Right.
Once they own the market, they can basically make the market look however they want. And we're not alleging any of this is happening. We're just pointing out the potential for this. Just like the TikTok video where the last house was purchased at a high value and they go, oh, well, all these other houses are now worth that. And it's no different than buying a house for $100,000 over, saying we're going to kick back $80,000 to you. We just have to close at this amount because we're getting a loan. But we're going to kick back some money to you if you say you'll close at this house at this value. And then they sell the other houses because this one sold really high. Right.
But do keep in mind that it takes more than just one outlier house to determine property values. So, and appraisers are professional people and they do understand what's happening in the market. So they do keep that in mind. They're not going to use one outlier for the value for the whole market. So the iBuyers would have to do more than one outlier to really pump up the prices of the whole neighborhood.
We should get an appraiser and ask them if they see a tax record price and they see that it was one of these corporations that bought it, do they automatically deduct a bunch of money knowing there's all these fees, repairs, and closing costs that the buyer, 100% the buyer has to pay? And if they take that into account, or they just go, oh, hey, it's 300, I'll just say 300 then because it's matched.
So, honestly, I would doubt it because they don't have any documentation to back that up.
Okay.
So I would doubt it.
Okay. So this is something, bookmark this video and share it with people, because it's, like I said, we're not saying anything's happening. We're just saying there's definitely potential when all these fees are not showing up publicly. You can't see what the buyer actually got for the house. In the MLS, you can see everything, because you can see what he paid, the commissions that were paid essentially, and then closing costs and repairs and contributions to the buyer for different things. And they show up, it's pretty transparent. You can actually get a good idea of what the deal was. But on these, you don't really know. Like you don't know.
So, an easy fix for this, honestly, would be to get the final settlement statement. So if an appraiser is doing an appraisal and they're using one of these properties as a comparable, or this is the property that is the subject property that they're appraising, an easy fix would be to get a copy of the final settlement statement, and that usually will show up there.
Yep. Anyway, that is our video for today. If you liked it, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share it with your friends.
All right, see you on the next video.
Bye.